For only 2 years, there was this pop-up haunted house attraction that would open in October. It was unofficially called Haunted Hill House because there was some sign that looked like it was bought from Party City or something that was propped in front by the parking lot, and it said Haunted Hill House. The parking lot wasn't actually a parking lot at all, just grass that was designated as a parking area. This was the year they closed down, and this was the year my friends and I went. I went with Matt, Michael, and Eddie. We went on a Thursday night because we were in college and all of us had Fridays off, so it was definitely quieter than it would have been on a weekend. There was surprisingly no line for the ticket stand, and when we followed the directions to the entrance, there was only a really short line there. I'd say like 4 people ahead of me. What we didn't realize, though, is that they were only letting one person in at a time. We had no idea that was part of this haunted house. If anything, this would make it scarier. We shoved Michael in front to go first. I was second to last before Eddie. Every couple of minutes, they would tell the next person to go in when Matt went in ahead of me. I actually started to get nervous. I hadn't done a haunted house since I was a little kid, and I was with my family. Then, it was my turn to go in, as this woman dressed in some bloodied costume opened the door and told me to enter. I stepped through the door, and as it shut behind me, I was in this dark building lit up mainly by small flashing lights. As I walked through, I was faced with a bunch of gruesome props of mutilated dead corpses and other pretty horrific things once in a while. Actors dressed in horrific costumes would jump from around corners or through little holes in the walls, and just about every single time they got me. 'Cause I jump. I was in some dark hallway separating 2 rooms when I felt something brush up on me from behind. I let out a short scream as I turned, and in the darkness I could see a tall figure in front of me. I laughed after seeing it. Then something I wasn't expecting happened next. The actor started pushing me down this dark hallway. I could hardly see anything I was going along with, yet thinking this was part of the attraction. I don't remember how long exactly I was allowing this actor to push me in the darkness, but eventually he stopped, and I heard a door close and things went silent. I didn't know what was happening. I still thought this was part of the act, and I was definitely scared because it was pitch black. Then I felt hands grabbing me, but in a very weird way, not in a way that a haunted house actor should. I was being full-on grabbed, and so I pushed the person off and said, "Get thee off me, dude." I stood there in silence. Now I said, "You're going too far. Man, you can't touch people like that." Thinking this was still just part of the haunted house act. I waited there expecting the actor to progress me to the next part of the attraction or just do something, but nothing was happening. Enough time passed now that I knew this wasn't right, and so I took out my phone. Even though they told us not to take our phones out at any time during the attraction, I turned on the flashlight and found myself in a storage room with props and janitorial equipment. But I'd be lying if I said that was the first thing I noticed. The first thing that caught my attention was the tall man. Standing 3 or 4 T away from me, he didn't look like an actor at all. He wasn't wearing a costume, he was just wearing all black with a black face mask covering half his face. I looked for the door as I said, "What are you doing, dude?" He didn't say anything. He just started making these motions with his arms as if he was acting like he was supposed to be a character. I found the door and left the room. I used my phone flashlight to navigate back down the dark hall, the direction we came when I found the next actor who yelled at me to turn off my flashlight. I told them I was violated and assaulted by somebody who may or may not work for the attraction, and I wanted to get out of there. I could tell the actor was probably just some teenager not much younger than me, and he didn't know what to do, really. He dropped his character act and told me to just keep walking that way and that I'm almost to the end. I asked where his boss would be. He said I'd have to go back to the ticket stand as the little manager's office is attached to the ticket stand, so I continued the rest of the haunted house speed walking, making it clear I was just trying to get out. And a few minutes later I was out. I found all 3 of my friends who were confused how I ended up getting out last. I told them what happened, and then we all went to the ticket stand and I asked for the manager. The worker said that he wasn't there tonight, but that he'd be back tomorrow. I told the worker about. what happened, and she said she would alert the team about it. I requested my money back because of it, and she gave me back my $30. It was the next day that a girl from our college who we all knew posted on Facebook that she was sexually assaulted by someone in the same haunted house the night before the night we were also there. This was the reason the place was eventually shut down that month. When I reached out to her on Facebook, it sounded like we had the same exact experience, only the aggressor got a lot more physical with her. She pressed charges on the owner of the attraction for, I'm assuming, negligence. The attraction staff, of course, swore that that man who assaulted the two of us didn't actually work there. I'm sure that's the truth, but I don't understand how they didn't have proper security measures in place to prevent something like this from happening. This was the first and last time I ever went to a haunted house attraction. I live in Fort Worth, Texas, and every year there's this big haunted house attraction that opens up. A few of my friends wanted to go this year, and I figured it's time I just finally experience a haunted house. For a little early context, I had a very troubled childhood that's caused me to develop PTSD, but I'll get more into that later. It was a weekend, so nobody wanted to go into this sober. My friend Noah hosted a little pregame for all of us. It was going to be 6 of us. My 3 guy friends, and 2 of their girlfriends. We all smoked and drank in Noah's backyard. Everyone thinking it would make the experience more fun, we bought our tickets for the attraction on their website. While we were pre-gaming, I rarely ever smoked weed because it makes me kind of paranoid. But I guess tonight I wanted to try smoking again and see if I could overcome that barrier, and I felt good, actually. I think the mix of alcohol and weed kind of canceled out the usual negative thoughts I would have from just smoking alone. Eventually, we called in Uber to the attraction, which was like 20 minutes away from Noah's house. There was a half-hour line. The place was pretty busy. We made friendly with the people in line ahead of us. I was pretty cross-faded, honestly, but I wasn't gone. Like, I remember just about everything that happened. When we got to the front, I started feeling a bit woozy, but I didn't say anything to my friends. We entered the haunted house, and from the start there was a lot of screaming and intensity. The actors were really good, but intense, and it was starting to give me anxiety. I was starting to realize how not okay I was, and how much of a mistake getting high was. One of the haunted house actors must have realized how scared and quiet I looked, and he chose to get in my face, trying to scare me, yelling and making noises. I'm not going to lie. I was starting to internally freak out, but I was trying to keep it together in front of my friends. This haunted house was going on for what felt like forever. And in my condition, every single jump scare made me almost my pants. All the flashing lights and fog really made this whole experience even more rapey and surreal. We came to this room lit up with an eerie red glow, with a bloodied man dressed as a guy in a suit and top hat, yelling at us, part of the ACT, but behind him, in the corner of the room, was a guy who wasn't dressed as anything. He was just standing there looking at me into my soul, and as I realized I was looking at the face of my father, I let out a scream straight from my stomach as I felt every hair in my body stand up. The room went silent, and my friends looked at me laughing at first, thinking I was joking around. But when they saw I was serious, one of the girls grabbed me and asked what's wrong. I said it's my dad. I pointed to the corner where there was now no one standing. I remember all my friends and the actor being confused, and everyone could tell I was not messing around. My friends knew about my troubled past. There's no one there. One of my friends said the actor apparently asked my friends if I was okay. I was now in the middle of a full-on panic attack, yelling, "I want to leave. I want to leave." Noah left with me through a side exit, and he sat with me while our friends finished the attraction. It wasn't cheap, so I wasn't going to make them all come out with me. As we sat outside the place, Noah told me I shouldn't have smoked so much, as he tried to assure me that my dad wasn't in there. It was just hallucinating. So my father used to abuse my siblings, and I'm the oldest, so I remember the most of it. He left us and our mom one day and never came back when I was 10. My close friends know about this to a certain extent, so I didn't have to explain to Noah. When our friends were done, they met us at a Wendy's nearby, where I was just trying to eat to help calm me down. I was embarrassed, but my friends didn't judge, thankfully, not to my face. At least I went home earlier than everyone else. I didn't want to spoil their nights when I got home. I knocked out right away. I guess because of how drunk and high I was that night. I was having a nightmare about the scene at the haunted house, and my father standing in the corner of the room, he was saying, "Wake up." Charlie and I did wake up. I woke up in my dark room in the middle of the night to see my father towering over my bed, looking down at me with his eyes open super wide. It was literally this towering 9FT tall version of my father, bending down with his body contouring in an impossible way. And I saw it. It took me a few seconds for me to digest what I was looking at and scream straight from my stomach again. My mom came rushing in and turned on the lights. And the apparition was gone. My heart was racing and my blood ran cold. I cried to my mom that I saw Dad. It was one of the most scarring nights of my adult life. I don't touch weed or any substances anymore besides light alcohol, and I'm never going to a haunted house attraction again after. That during CO, I thought it would be fun to get a job at a local haunted house attraction. My friend Marissa was already working there, and she told me they were looking for new actors and actresses. She pulled some strings and got me a job after I met with the owner. There were multiple sections to the haunted house attraction, including 3 haunted houses and the haunted corn maze on my first day on the job. There was some slight rehearsing my character and just demonstrating my acting skills to one of the supervisors who was on duty. My role for the night was assigned to be a damsel in distress, and this meant I was going to be tied to a pole and yelling at the guests to help me as they walked past me. Of course, all guests would be told before entering not to touch any of the actors or actresses, so they would know not to actually untie me when I'm screaming, "Help me." So before opening time, the supervisor, SL coordinator Jeremiah, walked me to my post, quite literally. My post because I'd be tied to a wooden post in the corn maze. I was honestly surprised that I actually had to be tied up, and not just pretend I asked how I would go to the bathroom and such. He said there would be short breaks between sessions. He also said there would be another supervisor nearby if I should need anything, which made me feel a little better. Once he walked away, I was left alone. There were a bunch of sound effects and scary ambience loops echoing through the cornfield from the various speakers hidden throughout the maze. Pretty soon, a little air horn sounded in the distance, indicating that the attraction was open and to get into character. I was nervous but excited since I was more so in the middle of the corn maze. It wasn't until a few minutes passed that the first guest would be passing me. I started to put on my best performance as a damsel in distress, so I screamed and fake cried, begging everyone who passed for help, saying he's coming back soon on time me. Some people would play along and say things back, and I improvised responses in character. Everyone was wearing face masks because of CO, so I couldn't see people's entire faces. Eventually, 2 male guests, who looked to be in their 30s, walked past looking at me, not saying a word. One of them slowed down as he just shot me this gaze with his big eyes that quite honestly creeped me out. They kept walking and disappeared further into the maze. This was around the time I was starting to realize there would be long gaps between guests. Sometimes I could suddenly hear someone brushing through the crops nearby. I was wondering if it was a staff member. The guests weren't supposed to stray off the path. I turned completely around and saw 2 men emerging from the crops towards the pole. I was tied to the same 2 men from before. Something wasn't right. I broke character and said, "You guys can't stray off the path." Then one of them laughed under their mask and the 2 men started speaking in some other language, I think Russian. Then one of them walked back to the path, but in the opposite direction that the guests are supposed to go. He just started standing there, keeping watch it seemed, while the other started to inappropriately grab me. I knew what was happening immediately, and I started screaming bloody murder, saying, "Help, this isn't part of the ACE." I called out things like I'm being assaulted, and moments later one of the supervisors emerged, seeing if I was okay. By then, the 2 men had already run away. I was untied and escorted out of the maze. I called my parents, and they insisted I just leave right now. I left, and Jeremiah and one of the other supervisors said I'd be paid for the night, and if I didn't want to come back, they'd understand, but to just keep them in the loop. I wish I could say it was over, though. On my drive home, I was extra cautious to make sure I wasn't being followed. I noticed halfway home that the same white car was behind me the whole time. I started making turns down random streets, and when the white car stayed behind me every single time I knew I was being followed, I knew I had to find the nearest police precinct, so I typed in police station on Google Maps and I started driving to it. They followed me the whole way until I pulled into the parking lot of the precincts. Then they kept driving. I never saw the car again. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before finally turning it back on and driving home, confirming every few seconds that I wasn't being followed. I didn't return to work at that haunted house attraction again. My name is Joan, and this all started when I was a little girl growing up in a small town in South Carolina. My family and I moved into a house the year that I was to start kindergarten. I was the youngest child of 4 kids. The home that our mom and stepdad provided for us was a very loving and happy one. Even though we didn't have a lot of money, we had lots of love and loads of fun. We never really talked about ghosts or anything paranormal, other than the obligatory campfire story to keep us from wandering off into the woods alone. My siblings would always play pranks on me because I was the baby, and for some reason it was fun to torture the youngest. So when little stuff started happening, my mom would just blame it on my brothers and sister. It would be things like objects not being where you would put them, or sometimes a light would be on that you had turned off as I got older, my siblings, and I would notice something like a white glowy flash of something moving through our kitchen and hallway. You would only see it out of the corner of your eye, and it was always in the same place, moving in the same direction. It never really bothered us, and Mom would just say it was just car lights or something of the sort. During our school years, all of our friends wanted to hang out at our house because our parents were so much fun to be around, and there was always some good food cooking in the kitchen. You could just feel the love they gave us, and our friends. With that being said, a couple of our friends started noticing the strange residual thing in the kitchen and hallway. It was always in the same spots and the same route. But not every night after the stuff being moved and the residual things that were being talked about. More stuff started happening. You could be washing dishes in the kitchen, and you could feel someone behind you watching you. But then no one would be there. You could hear your name being called, but no one would be in the house with you. As we got older, my brothers and sisters got married and moved out. But I, being the youngest by 6 years, was still there when I was in my late teens. I was having a sleepover with 3 of my friends when all of a sudden the glowing white flash of the residual thing that I mentioned before one of my guy friends totally freaked out. We tried to explain to him that, whatever it is, it never seemed bad and that this had been happening. For a very long time, nothing we told him was working. We literally had to take this 19-year-old guy home in the middle of the night. Fast forward to several years later, and I'm a single mom, and because of circumstances beyond my control, I was still living at home with Mom and Dad. My mom and dad watched my daughter while I worked, and one night when my daughter, who we'll call B, was around 4 years old, my mom said B would stand in the living room and talk towards the corner by the front door. My mom asked her who she was talking to, and Bean said she was talking to the snake man. Needless to say, this freaked my mom the hell out. So she got up and took B into the bedroom with my dad and then went to sleep. My mom told me that B had done this talking thing several times, but that was the only time my mom asked her who she was talking to. The other little things kept happening during this time as well, but it seemed the more it was talked about, the more often things would happen as B was getting a little older. She would come inside from playing outside and ask me what I wanted because she kept hearing me call her name, but I hadn't called her when B turned 7. We had lost my mom to a very short battle with colon cancer. This absolutely devastated Ed, my stepdad, and he wanted me and B to stay with them. So we did. He would keep B while I worked, and the two of them were very close. B really loved her grandpa. But 10 years after we lost my mom, Grandpa passed away from lung cancer, only 2 months after he was diagnosed after that. The feeling in the house just really changed. The love and light that used to fill the home was now gone, and there was a heavy feeling, and the house had a darkness to it. It was almost like when my parents left, something else came in. I was seeing shadows darker than the residual thing that had always been there. At the same time, B, who was 17 at the time, was also experiencing things as well. But we didn't tell each other because we didn't want the other one to be scared or think that each other had lost our minds. She and I were both going through a really dark time, and I really believed that that was what was giving this thing more energy. I came in from work one night, and B was already in bed. I went to the fridge to get a glass of tea when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my stepdad sitting cross-legged in the middle of the kitchen table. He looked very happy, and he had a big smile on his face. The kitchen table was his favorite spot. When he was alive, he would sit there and drink his coffee, and he loved it when you would just sit and talk with him at that moment. That I saw him, I just felt so much light in the room, like everything was going to be all right. The house felt lighter for a couple of weeks after that. During this time, a friend from work had asked to stay with us while his house was being renovated. I was more than happy to have him there, as he was a good friend, and he was a lot fun to be around. My niece would come over with her daughter, who was about 3 at the time. The 3-year-old would several times just start freaking out and start crying. Then, pointing towards my daughter's room, my niece would have to leave because her daughter would not calm down until they left. So now the house had once again started feeling dark again. Now, mind you, all of this is going on just within a couple of months after Grandpa passed away, so one day me and B are in the kitchen and I was cooking. B was sitting on the counter like teenagers do. Sometimes I was talking to her while my back was turned to her. I asked her a question, but she didn't answer me. I turned around, but she looked like she was in some kind of dazed-likey state. She was holding a butter knife and was scratching her leg with it. This had scared me because she was really out of it. I yelled her name and she came to like she was waking up from a dream state. That's when she started crying, then telling me what all she had been experiencing. She said that there was a dark shadow that would move up and down the wall in the corner of her bedroom. She said that it even moved around her bed while she was trying to sleep. It had gotten to the point that she could feel something breathing on her neck, she said. She was scared to tell me because of all I was going through with Grandpa passing away, and she didn't want me to think that she was losing it. That's when I told her about the things that I had seen as well. We both then agreed not to keep things from each other anymore. We figured that these things were happening because of the grieving and what we were going through. A couple of days later, when my daughter was at school, I had came home from working an early shift. My friend from work that had been staying with us was sitting in his car in the yard. I asked him what he was doing sitting in the car, which he replied, then he needed to talk to me about something very important. He proceeded to tell me then he wasn't going to be able to stay there anymore because that he thought our house was haunted. He told me that he had been seeing dark shadows moving around in the house, and then earlier that day, he was sitting on the back porch with his back to my daughter's bedroom window when he felt something blow really hot. Breath on his neck. He said that the breath was so strong that it actually moved his hair. He also said that the wind wasn't blowing because it's the first thing I asked him, even though I knew it wasn't the wind. He had been waiting on me to get home because he didn't want to go in the house by himself to get his stuff. He got all of his stuff except for his bed, and he was going to come back later that day to get it right after he left. I had took a shower and I was brushing my teeth when I heard the very distinct sound of the back door opening and closing. Then footsteps. I then saw out of the corner of my eye someone leaning against the door frame of the bathroom as I turned around. I had then said, wow, that was fast, thinking it was my friend who had just left. But there was no one there all of a sudden. The room felt strange, like good and bad all at the same time. Right then the phone rang. It was my sister-in-law. Just a little background on my sister-in-law. She and my brother are really big time members in their church, and I didn't think they believed all of the things me and B were going through. She said that she was very concerned, that she had a really strong feeling that there was something in the house, and that whatever it was after me and B, and especially B when she said that I just started. Boo-hoo so hard, and I was trying to tell her all about the stuff that me and B were going through. She told me to get out my Bible and turn to the part about the armor of God and to read it out loud. I turned to the page, but I couldn't read it. It was like the pages were blank. I told her I couldn't see it. So she started reading the words for me, and they started appearing to where I could read them aloud with her when she finished reading the verses. She said a prayer when she finished the prayer. I kid you not. The house felt so much lighter and brighter. She said for me to open a Bible to those verses and place one in every room. She then said that maybe we should really think about moving out of that house. This had honestly really shocked me, because I thought that the family wanted us to stay there, because that's where we had all grown up at. But everyone was okay with us giving it up. This was such a relief for me. I went that day and rented an apartment for me, and we moved most of our stuff within a couple of days, except for a few boxes in the attic. A very close family friend took over the house and was doing some renovations the day we went to pick up the last box of stuff and gave the family friend the keys. He was at the house. Painting the kitchen, he had the back and front doors propped open for fresh air from the paint. When we pulled into the driveway, B and I just kind of looked at each other, so I told her to sit in the car because I didn't want her to have to go back in the house. I went and got the box. When I handed him the key to the house, both the front and back door slammed shut at the very same time. It scared me so bad that I just couldn't speak a full sentence. I just looked at the guy and I told him I gotta get out of here when I opened the door and ran out. B was just standing there with a very shocked look on her face. I asked her what she was doing, and she said she was going to come help me carry the box of stuff. But the right when she was about to come inside the door had slammed right in her face. We left there that day and haven't been back to that house since. This was 14 years ago, looking back on it now. I honestly believe my mom and stepdad were the ones who shut the door that day to keep my daughter from coming in the house, because they didn't want whatever was there to attach itself to her. We drive by the place every once in a while, but I don't miss it at all, even though we all had a really great childhood and had so much love and fun growing up in that house. It completely changed after my mom and stepdad had passed away. As far as I know, the same people have lived there since we moved out, so hopefully they haven't had any problems. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to my story. And I would really love to know what you guys think, what was actually going on in that house. Stay hungry, everyone, and stay safe. House. This took place in Springville, Utah, about 15 years ago. Myself and 3 sisters lived in a town home at the time. During our time living there, we had encountered weird situations. The town home consisted of 2 floors. We had all encountered weird and creepy stuff in the town home also. I want to note that Springville, Utah and surrounding areas are known to be famous for the Mormon Church. A cult to some degree. The area we lived in, the town home, was built over an old cemetery years back. I'd like to start off with my dad's stories one day when he was sleeping downstairs. He would F a person hug him late at night, and he would think it was my mom. But there was no physical person nearby. He also encountered in the upstairs bathroom someone staring at him while he was in the restroom. While having the bathroom door open, he would see in the reflection of the mirror a lady with hair in his room. While in the restroom, he got goosebumps but just brushed it off. He mentioned how bad the chills felt at the moment. My parents stated that they would hear noises and dishes falling at random times of the day and night. But my dad's stories were no more scarier than the ones me and my sisters experienced. My sisters, during that time, would counter stuff in their rooms. They would hear noises in the closet. 2 of my sisters, while randomly hanging out upstairs, saw a little girl pass in one of the rooms and just vanish. Very confused, they went in there to play in their room, playing with this McDonald's toy in the closet. You would press a button and it would say French fries over and over. But during that time, it had no batteries in it. After figuring out that they had no batteries, they went about their night. But later that night, the McDonald's toy was placed back in the closet, and it started to say French fries over and over and over again, getting louder until the voice actually turned into a demonic tone. Now, I know this sounds ridiculous, and I probably wouldn't believe it either. But this really did happen. Well, finally, I myself would have an encounter as well. I had a pretty weird dream while sleeping in the living room before heading to bed. I would lock the front and back door where the laundry room was, and everyone was sound asleep upstairs. I went to bed, and I had a dream where me and my siblings were downstairs, and in the corner of my eye, I had saw a tall figure staring at us with the door halfway open. And the laundry room, I froze at the tall black figure, and I really tried to keep an eye out on it. I woke up after having that dream, and I was frozen still. When I got up that morning, I saw the back door to the laundry room wide open. I had told my dad all about the dream I had, and I had even asked him if they went upstairs that night, or during the early morning, but no one ever did. We ended up moving right across next to another town home in those last remaining years that we lived in that area. But there was also another encounter that my dad told me when we moved to the second town home. My dad had mentioned while they were selling the town home across where we used to live around 2 a.m. he had got up and headed to the restroom, and he could see the other backside of a town home. He said that he saw in the upstairs hallway a lady with long hair entering the restroom, which was odd because no one could be in that house since it was for sale, especially at 2 a.m., which would be considered trespassing. My dad and sister stated and mentioned these stories years after we moved out of the town homes area. But what really bothers me to this day is myself, as well as my siblings, have all recently, and since then encountered weird dreams about that place regarding both of the town homes we lived in. Especially me, to this day, I dream of being sucked into the restroom or being watched in that town home, or I just have recurring dreams where I still live there, or I dream of random scary things. My sisters also dream of seeing people staring or chasing them, and I can't understand why, after moving away all these years, that we still have those dreams of this place. Perhaps there's just a much darker meaning to the neighborhood that we don't know. In any case, I'm just really glad we don't live there. Thank you for listening. Finally, do not hesitate to express your opinion on this content below in the comments box, and also support us for this new channel so that we continue to spread more fun. See you later.